Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar, Decoding the DNA of Productivity with VDI. Today's webcast is being sponsored by Dell, Nutanix, and AppSense. Together, the three technologies provide a complete VDI stack that can help you accelerate your implementations, simplify ongoing management, and optimize end-user experience. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. At the bottom of your audience console, there are some application widgets. You can expand your slide area by clicking on the maximize icon in the top right of the slide area or by dragging the bottom right corner of the slide area. A copy of today's slide deck is available in the resource list widget, which is a green folder at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions during the webcast, please click on the Q&A widget at the bottom to submit your question. We do have representatives from Dell, Nutanix, and AppSense available to answer questions. If we do run out of time to answer your question, we'll follow up with you via email. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the question mark icon. There's some helpful information in there. This webinar is being recorded, and the on-demand version of the webcast will be available tomorrow and can be accessed using the same audience link that you used to register for this session. So we are going to begin with some introductions, followed by a brief market overview to set the stage, and we'll delve into the business roundtable where your peers will share how and why they implemented VDI. Let me introduce today's speakers. I'm pleased to have Steve Lance, Director of IT Infrastructure and Operations from Torrance Memorial Medical Center. Marc is the Corporate Director of IT at Promise Healthcare, and Ray Jaksic, CTO and founder of Cortex Services. Our roundtable is being moderated today by Amy Price, Product Marketing Manager at Dell. Thank you all so much for being here today. Amy, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to preface this with a little bit of overview as to why there is such interest in desktop virtualization and VDI in general. And this comes down to really three areas. The first one is around security and compliance. There are certainly many restrictions and compliance and regulations within the healthcare industry, notably HIPAA, and the privacy of patient data and patient information is paramount in a healthcare facility. So preserving that confidentiality is something that you all have to live with every day. And VDI in general keeps this information from being on endpoints. So the possibility for loss or compromise is extremely low since you're managing it within your data center environment. The second has to do with end user satisfaction, both from a productivity and an experience perspective. So end users and your medical care staff are trying to do things faster. They're trying to have more complete information when they have to make a decision or to take an action in a patient care. They need less overhead on them in terms of endpoint devices, and they need better access to the complete data instead of having to sneakernet information around from department to department around a healthcare facility. And, so that's a productivity gain when they have all the information available to be able to make a decision wherever that needs to be made. And then the second half of it is even with all of this information available, you still want this experience to be good for them, to be smooth, to have fast logons, to not let security get in the way of them having to log on and do their jobs. So you want it to be fast, consistent, and effortless. Now, the third aspect has to do from an IT management perspective and increasing the productivity of the IT staff. And this comes into sort of two places. One are the management of the endpoints, because today in many healthcare facilities, you've got laptops and desktops and terminals scattered throughout the facility and also in the hands of some of the practitioners. And managing those endpoints, everything from, physical hardware failures to situations about, for instance, Patch Tuesdays and such, that is a lot of overhead for many groups. And desktop virtualization really removes that barrier by allowing that all now to be managed centrally and for the endpoints to become very simple to replace. And then finally, easier infrastructure management. And this has two aspects too. One is the overall management of the infrastructure, that's delivering desktop virtualization and these services within your facility. And the second is being able to scale it appropriately to meet the demands of your users, particularly in growth situations. So the ideal situation is that if you can actually continue to grow the number of users, but yet maintain your same IT staff or have them freed up to do other things. That's the way we are trying to point this. And desktop virtualization really allows you to help achieve these kinds of goals. So I'm going to move in the next portion of the presentation, which is really let Steve talk about what he's doing with Torrance Memorial, just to give a little overview, and then we'll get an overview from Marc and from Ray as well before we get into the panel session. So Steve, would you tell us a little bit about Torrance Memorial?
Sure. Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. My name is Steve Lance, and I'm the Director of Infrastructure and Operations at the Torrance Memorial Medical Center in Torrance, California. I've been with the organization for 5 years. I'm responsible for our data center, server, and storage infrastructure. We call that our core computing services. Network and telecommunications, the IT service hub, which includes our service desk, desktop support, and IT asset management, and information security. Torrance Memorial is a locally governed 446-bed nonprofit medical center that was founded in 1925. We've remained independent for the last 90 years, and during that time, technology has become integrated across our continuum of care.
Thanks, Steve. So, Marc, would you give us a overview of what Promise is and sort of your role there?
Sure. My name is Marc, and I'm a corporate director of IT for Promise Healthcare here in Boca Raton, Florida. I've been with Promise for my last 9 years. We are 500-plus beds healthcare organization that specializes in long-term acute care as well as skilled nursing. We have 21 facilities across multiple states. Our biggest presence is in Louisiana, Florida, and California. I am responsible for entire IT infrastructure, and I also oversee our application team. I'm a lead member of our corporate IT planning committee that has to come up with the solutions and ideas on how to approach current and future IT needs of the company.
Thank you. And Ray, would you also speak a bit about CoreTech?
Sure can. Thank you, Amy. I'm Ray Jaksic, Chief Technology Officer and one of the co-founders here at CoreTech. Our mission at CoreTech is to ensure our customers' projects succeed with no exceptions. Our primary purpose is improving our clients' end-user experiences and IT operations through virtualization, mobility, and cloud. Approximately 75% of our revenue is with healthcare organizations, and our customers range from 100-bed community hospitals to large national multi-hospital health systems with tens of thousands of beds and over 100,000 users. I'm responsible for defining and supporting our current solution offerings, as well as identifying the future needs of our customers and making sure that CoreTech has relevant solutions to meet those needs in the future. And myself and my technology office team have worked extensively with both Torrance and Promise to architect and deploy what CoreTech calls our virtual clinical workstation solution.
Thank you, Ray. So we're going to move into the Q&A, the roundtable portion of this discussion. And one thing I would encourage audience members to do here is to go ahead and enter questions into the chat window. At one point in this discussion, we're going to pause and actually take questions from you all, which will be can be directed to any of our panelists. And we also have people online from AppSense as well as Nutanix, and myself from Dell to also address any questions there that you might have. So the first question I have for our panelists, and I'll start first with Marc, is what really motivated you to implement desktop virtualization VDI within your organization?
Well, our main motivation for VDI was a migration of a PC with outdated operating systems and replacing a hardware with better, more secure solution, better than standalone PCs. And we want a solution that would be would provide a great experience for doctor, that provides mobility, and in the future lets us migrate easily. For us, our headquarters being in Florida, big concern was high availability and disaster recovery side. So we thought about it, implementing VDI, that we have to have a dual data center with availability to run the entire system. If one size goes down, being able to run the entire system on the second portion of the data center. We have a dual data centers, one in Florida and one in California. They both active, but they are both capable of running the entire system.
Thanks. So, Steve, let me also ask from a Torrance perspective, what motivated you all to go to VDI?
Yes, when I joined Torrance Memorial 5 years ago, I found a variety of solutions that had been deployed over the years, and that included desktops, tablet computers, mobile carts. Many of these devices used generic logins to get on the network, and then individuals would use their own credentials to log into specific applications. As people moved through our facility, they had to log out and log back into these various systems. So virtual desktop, for us, started with some simple objectives. The primary really was to provide a better clinical workflow for our doctors and clinicians while maintaining security. As Amy, you mentioned, preserving confidentiality of patient data is very important in our organization. So we started with a proof of concept back in 2012, and then we conducted a pilot. And then the real trigger for our larger deployment, which is now well above 750 devices, was the opening of a new 7-story, 390,000 square foot tower in November of 2014. We worked with Cortec services throughout the process, beginning with a proof of concept and then a pilot and then the larger deployment. And we've deployed a solution that includes the Y0 clients, AppSense and Nutanix on the back end. And I will say it is among the most popular IT solutions I've ever deployed.
That's good to hear. So let me continue on with that a bit, Steve. You talk about it being one of the most popular IT solutions. Well, what were sort of the top benefits you hoped to achieve from this VDI implementation?
It really began with finding a way to improve the time it took to access information. And patient care is obviously a top priority in our organization. And moving into a new facility, which was intentionally built to provide more privacy for patients. We have 256 private patient rooms in our new tower, and the clinical staff would be moving a lot more throughout that facility. So improving their productivity, supporting the change in the workflow, not just moving between private rooms in our new tower, but moving between buildings on our campus. We deployed a lot of computers in our new tower. We deployed computers on mobile carts in every patient room. There's computers in alcoves in the hallway between patient rooms, computers at the nurses' stations and in other shared work areas. But we really needed to make it easy for people to move from one device to another. And improving security was really another priority for us. We needed to move away from these generic Windows kiosk IDs, and our new tower was identified as the first facility where this policy would be implemented. So our VDI solution really helped relieve some of the angst around this. We had some challenges convincing people this was going to be better, but it didn't take long once they saw how it worked. The new login process for us is 50% faster. Typically 20 seconds or less on the initial login, 10 seconds or less on reconnects, and the staff just loves it. The Y0 clients also helped us improve security by ensuring that data isn't stored on the local machines, and every user has their own virtual workspace that they authenticate to individually. We also discovered a few unanticipated benefits, which is really more on the desktop side. So we spend less time deploying and supporting these devices. And we track a lot of metrics in our organization. And looking back at the number of desktop incidents that we logged before and after VDI, we've seen an average reduction of 10 to 30% per month. And while I haven't taken time to really drill into the data, I can tell you that we've had very few issues with the WISE devices. And for those issues we do have, they are very quickly remediated.
Excellent. I'll turn it over to Marc. Marc, what were the top benefits you planned or hoped to achieve from this implementation of VDI within Promise?
Our user productivity was one of the biggest concern. We really wanted something that the user can quickly get in and get out. But with the approach, with VDI approach to this to our problem, our main concern fell on a disaster recovery and high availability. We want to make sure that this is something that will work on both ends and it will be always available. Nutanix and in combination with the design provided by Cortex pretty much resolved that issue for us and made it fully available. We wanted that solution to be also user-friendly. We wanted something that it's really easy, accessible, easy tap and go, and move quickly through the hospital. Are you moving from the station to station? But we also have to be concerned about the budget, our IT budget, and make sure that we're not going into a huge spending and trying to contain our low budget still. So these were really the two top benefits that we actually managed to achieve. We kept our team pretty much intact. We're still in a small team, and the solution is fantastic. Users love it. And performance is greatly improved. Moving from the standalone PCs and a client-based application presentation, moving to the VDI, make a huge difference for our end users. Also, the time of the login, it's just incredibly better than what it was.
Excellent, excellent. Sounds like some good benefits there. I'll ask Ray for his perspective. So Ray, in your work with Torrance and with Promise as well as others, what are sort of the motivations you've seen as well as the typical benefits you've seen from customers when they've implemented this technology?
As far as those things go, Amy, the biggest things for us is what we always see is and they both had it, everyone has infrastructure investments to make. So Steve had ones that he had to make because of a new tower. Marc had ones because due to financial and other reasons, infrastructure hadn't been invested in a long time and it couldn't be ignored any longer. And the fact that they just took a different approach, they weren't going to do the same old things to put in the same infrastructure that wasn't meeting their users' needs, and they wanted to do something different to enable that workflow. I mean, those are the things that it really saw with their groups and talking about them that made them sort of leaders and pioneers in this space, and they were very open to all the different ideas and approaches that we came up to them with that provided a lot of this flexibility and integration.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that. So back to Marc and Steve. So Marc, once you implemented this technology, what kind of feedback did you receive from the clinical staff, your doctors and nurses and other practitioners? Certainly that's a big factor in the success of any sort of a technology implementation.
Yes, well, it started with us. Once we saw the design that Cortex developed for us, we kind of figured that this is pretty much a dream come true for us, a design that will perfectly fit our organization and will be great for our users. So that's on our level, but once we moved in and with the deployment, we have a lot of users being a little skeptical in the beginning that we managed to guide them through and get them on our side quickly. Most of the feedback were absolutely positive, and everybody was very ecstatic getting a new system, getting a really advanced system, and so all the feedback really was positive. We had a few people, and I have a great example of one of the members of the nursing staff that was very vocal about not wanting to go to new systems after a really short period of time and explaining to him solution. He started sending us emails asking when we'll be able to utilize his cell phone to log in instead of card. So feedback was very, very positive and everybody is really happy with the solution.
Excellent. Steve, you went from a small pilot to a large deployment when the tower opened. What kind of feedback did you get when you from your clinical staff once this technology was implemented?
It was surprisingly positive. Moving from a small pilot to a large deployment was a little nerve-wracking for me, but we really experienced very few issues following our rollout. I'll share just a few examples of the feedback that I've received, which really help highlight what I have shared as a very successful and popular solution. So following the opening of our new tower, we had a command center open for a period of time, and the purpose of the command center was to quickly triage issues. But on one particular day, after a long day, we had a call from a cardiologist, and there was some hesitation about why he might be calling. But his request was to say, the solution's working great. Why isn't it anywhere in some of these other departments where I work? So that was kind of our first indication that this was going well. More recently, our chief medical officer stopped me after a meeting and thanked me for deploying the solution, saying it's changed the way the physicians work. And he said they really do love it. And then just yesterday, I received an email from our VP of medical staff who said the chief of the OBGYN and president of our laborist group are finding it very difficult to move between our new tower and the labor and delivery unit, which is in our older tower. So she said, can you please move faster to get virtual desktop into that area? So our experience really has been very similar to Marc's in that we did encounter some skepticism. We had people questioning, is this really right for the organization? But now that it's been deployed for well over a year, it really is a go-to that the staff offers as a solution to address both stability and performance issues. We're getting ready to deploy it in our emergency department and a number of other departments throughout the hospital.
Excellent. Thank you. So, Ray, this is a time for you to really talk about your engagements with Steve and Marc, and how, as you engaged with them around the Cortex solution, would you tell us more about what you saw as the key technical issues facing both of these facilities, both Promise and Healthcare, and then how Promise Healthcare and Torrance, and how you helped address them?
Okay, sure. Thanks a lot, Amy. I'd love to do that. Really it was performance at a reasonable cost. From the performance standpoint, some other things we had to deal with was Steve's electronic medical record system is externally hosted. So that means the solution is delivered to their desktops from an external data center via Citrix as a published application. And to deliver that into a virtual desktop that provides seamless roaming, it would require a double hop. This would be a hit to performance in a time to access the application's perspective. So we knew our virtual clinical workstation solution was going to be critical here because of some of the IP and configurations that we have. We calculated that if we saved Torrance approximately $1 million per year in user productivity for just 4 seconds of reconnect savings times that we provided. So we were able to get that double hop connection to happen 4 seconds faster than Citrix natively out of the box, and that alone by itself was a savings of over $1 million in productivity. If you add in the overall decrease in initial login times provided by AppSense and using the Dell Zero clients, the end user savings really are in the multi-millions of dollars with their new workflow based on virtual desktops. The reasonable cost aspect was driven by the use of published desktops instead of true VDI for standard clinical use cases. This is still a virtual desktop, but it requires a lot less of the more expensive infrastructure. And then using VDI, the true definition of VDI desktops for power use cases such as users that require drag and dictation and things like that. So that was one way, is just give the right desktop to the right use case. The other areas were when you talk about Nutanix, in comparison to other solutions, the performance you get at the price points really aren't comparable. And then from reducing costs of purchasing the Y0 clients instead of PCs. So Steve and Marc, they both knew they had hardware refreshes to do in Marc's case for Promise. Steve's case, he had to buy new devices for the tower. There was a tremendous cost savings there of putting in 0 clients instead of full thick PCs. Some of the other things were time to market to deliver the solution. Steve, they made their final decision because they were getting worried. The deadlines were coming on the new Lundquist tower. They made that final decision the last week of June, and they had the tower was going live in late October. They had deadlines. They had to have their desktop infrastructure and apps available in August. And a classic example of this from time to deliver was that we received a PO on June 30th, and within 3 weeks, we were spinning up virtual servers and virtual desktop images. From time to PO, included delivery, included in-data center, included the initial virtualization installs. So that was just an incredible thing. I've never seen any other technologies that you can spin up, that fast from the time of a PO. And some of the other things that we've seen, and generally speaking, they both held true for Promise and Torrance, but we see in general is it's all about providing an integrated solution. Our CoreTech virtual workstation is an integrated solution built on Absence, Nutanix, and Dell technologies. From a Nutanix perspective, you get modular scale, right? There's a minimum starting in Nutanix of 3 nodes, and you might be able to find a smaller storage solution with some servers. Might be a little less cost effective, but then as soon as you outgrow that small storage, you got to buy a brand new storage system, right? Nutanix is modular. You don't have to ever buy anything, a brand new major component. You have your initial investment, and then as you need more, you just modularly add another node. From an Absence perspective, it adds the ability to provide great performance while giving the user experience to customize their desktop. So they get a persistent experience from the user perspective, but it's happening on a non-persistent desktop, which is much easier for IT to manage. So given the changing use case story, like when a user needs to go to the Dragon use case, we have the ability to be able to, it could be a user, they're getting their standard published desktop with a few clicks, putting in a few different groups in Active Directory. That user, next time they log in, they could get a true VDI desktop, and they won't tell the difference. It'll look exactly the same, all their personalization's there. Next, they would just have the Dragon use case, and they'd be running on a totally different set of technologies and infrastructure. And then from the Wise perspective, it adds integration with Imprivata. They were one of the first ones to add integration with Imprivata, which is another key technology within healthcare. And their OS is the most streamlined on the market with the capabilities that we need to meet our use cases. And that becomes important. At first, it's not a big deal, but if you have a lot of wireless in your environment, like most hospitals do, wireless carts, devices, tablets, and such, and you want to have VDI on those and use thin clients, all right, having a 20 meg OS, which is approximately what the Wise Thin OS uses for their 0 clients, you can do updates and images across that wireless network all day long. The typical thin client, even they call it a 0 non-Windows thin client, has about a 500 meg OS. That means you're plugging in your wireless devices into walls every time you make updates. And to give you an example, we were going through and doing a lot of latest edge technologies preparing for the Torrance Lundquist implementation, and we had to update the firmware 5 times before we went live in a 6-week period. That would have killed us to send people around into a hospital and find carts everywhere, even when nobody was in there, and plug them into walls. So it truly gave us an easy and immeasurable amount of flexibility in doing updates quickly without having to impact or go see the user community. So that's really what it comes down to those are all the things that we normally see. We've seen with both Promise and Torrance, but we see them across all of our customers across the U.S.
Very complete answer. Thanks, Ray. So I'm going to turn it back over onto Steve and Marc for asking about future plans and where you all are focusing your efforts now. So Steve, would you tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Torrance in terms of your next wave and how you're continuing to advance this technology?
Yes, we are continuing to work with Cortec on developing plans for expansion. As I mentioned, we're going to be deploying our solution in our emergency department. We're going to also be deploying it in 5 other departments: our radiology department, maternal child, GI lab, cath lab. There's really any area where we have clinical staff is a target for this solution. We are hoping to get a lot of that done early this year, and as I mentioned, our VP of Medical Staff is asking us to move faster. We think it's a good, solid solution. We're really happy with the Nutanix platform and all of the components, really, but we are now looking to leverage what we've done. The WISE devices have been great, and we know that all of these vendor solutions are working well in our organization. So we're anxious to continue moving ahead with the expansion and see continued value from the solution.
I'll also ask a little bit, you said that you had mentioned at one point that you had been concerned about documents and getting the documents off premises.
Yes, so we are, right. We are, even though we're a small independent facility, we are becoming more geographically dispersed here in the South Bay where our business is primarily located. So we're looking at how to leverage this solution across our footprint, which includes a variety of physician offices and urgent care facilities and other locations in the community that we serve. So we believe this solution will help in those areas as well.
Okay, thanks. So, Marc, I'll turn it to you when a little bit about what your future plans are and how you are moving since you've implemented since VDI, since that point.
Well, our VDI implementation, when we were planning and developing our infrastructure for this, we came up with the idea that we're going to migrate to Office 365 to be able to use some of the features that Office 365 provides in coexistence with the VDI. So we went pretty much at the same time through two deployments, big deployments, which on both we worked with Cortec. And we actually came across some challenges, including our licensing. Most of the VDI or virtual clinical workstations are pretty much put in the clinical areas, which causes a little bit issues on how we're going to handle end-user licensing. And we worked with Ray and his team to figure out how we're going to be able to do that, and we came up with very reasonable solutions. So our main focus for now is to continue on moving towards Office 365. We're planning on migrating all of our documents to OneDrive for Business and the SharePoint as an immediate next step, as well as a Skype for Business and everything else that comes with Office 365. VDI makes it easier for us because we're going to be able to deliver this to end users easily without really big hassle. And our infrastructure, when we migrated, we used actually Cortec to help us a little bit with this. We built the hybrid environment. We went through the hybrid environment, and our migration was very successful. We managed to migrate 2,000 users within 2 months or 3 months, which we got actually praise even from Microsoft for that. So our future is going to be focusing more on how much more we can use cloud-based solutions and move some of the services to the cloud, as we already utilizing this a little bit. The biggest pain point for us this year will be our EHR implementations. We are going through an evaluation process, and we're looking right now at some cloud solutions as well and trying to move this. That will be the biggest current challenges and ideas that we have. Okay.
Thanks. Let me turn this back on to Ray. From a future plans perspective, Ray, can you comment some on how Nutanix, Absence, and Dell are fitting into the plans that may go forward in future years?
Sure. The biggest thing for us we're doing a lot with cloud, and especially hybrid clouds, because everyone's not going to put their all their data and data centers into the cloud. There's always going to be a few use cases we think aren't going to make sense, but they've really helped enable us both with flexible licensing models and seamless integration into the cloud. Nutanix as well. I mean, you think of something like Nutanix or the Dell appliances running Nutanix as something that's to be on-prem, but you need an on-prem component typically with these solutions, again, to move workloads up and down and to handle that intelligence on what you want to sit in the cloud and what not. Same thing with AppSense. You're talking about continue abstracting the user from the device is critical not only today, but the future stability of desktops, both Promise and Torrance Healthcare.
Okay. So we've reached sort of the end of the initial roundtable, so I'm going to open this up for some questions and answers with Simon Kleppen, who's going to give us, from AppSense, is going to give us some questions that have been asked by our audience and direct them to some of our speakers. So Simon, over to you.
Thank you, Amy, and thanks everybody. And we're getting some good questions coming through. Please keep them coming through the question and answer session. I'm going to try and group them together and then pass them around our three core presenters and also to the Dell, Nutanix, and AppSense representatives. So I see some questions here about sort of infrastructure, about the desktop applications, particularly about scaling and growth, and then lastly about printing. And I think we'll take them in that order. Let's start with a couple of questions from Rex Taylor at United Regional, requesting information about, the VDI. Well, I'll read that question out. In each situation, was the VDI deployment primarily application virtualization or complete desktop virtualization? Now, Ray, I know you touched on this, but I'm wondering, Marc and Steve, had you had experience with Citrix beforehand, and what drove you to using the published desktop and then the VDI for the special cases? And maybe give us a little bit of your thoughts on that. Marc or Steve,
yeah.
Can you have a quick go at that one?
Sure. So this is Marc. We did not have a previous experience with Citrix and presented desktops. We were looking around to find a solution that would be cost-effective. That was one of the primary concerns for us. The licensing, combined licensing on any VDI platform, it doesn't matter if it was a VM or Citrix, combined with Microsoft licensing was pretty much overwhelming. And the solution that with the presented desktop, presented apps that the Cortex came up with, it fitted us perfectly. This is a pure presented solution, so in reality, we really don't have a full VDI. Everything is easy for a simple image, one image, easy to manage. We don't have many issues. Even just recently it happened to us that somebody opened a website, pulled down a virus or malware. All of a sudden, nothing started working. Simple reboot of the server, and we're back to normal. So it is a really presented solution, but I think it works great. Our idea is that we're going to move from this and scale back to full VDI. We're going to move into administration areas and start building a full VDI. But for right now, it is just a virtual clinical workstation.
And Steve, a little bit of your perspective on the pros and cons of using a published desktop versus a full VDI?
Sure. So we've had Citrix in our infrastructure for some time, and as Ray mentioned, part of that was driven by our electronic medical record being remote hosted. When we started working with Cortex and evaluating options for doing something with virtual desktop, we really began to evaluate where it made sense to do the application virtualization versus complete desktop virtualization. And what they've helped us implement is really a solution that meets the individual needs of our clinical staff and the physicians, and we're just going to continue to look for those use cases to leverage the solution. Similar to what Marc is talking about, we're thinking about where else can this be deployed throughout our organization.
Excellent. And Ray, from the Cortec as the technology sort of providers behind this, what's Cortec's philosophy? You covered it a little bit before. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
Well, seeing the question, a couple of things real quickly that add to what Steve and Mark were saying. The solutions truly are not, the end user gets a virtual desktop. In Mark's case, it's just a published desktop today. They're going to add VDI use case in the future. In Steve's case, some people get a published desktop, which is a full desktop. Some get a VDI desktop. And then applications, I'll talk Steve specifically, they owned AppV, and which is an application virtualization technology. We created one package, and then we would, with that package, deliver the applications to the whichever virtual desktop they needed, so their VDI desktop or their published desktop. And some applications were already being delivered via Citrix published app. So again, that's that double hop. Steve's EMR externally hosted and a couple internal apps were still delivered via published applications into the virtual desktops. So, and then for the future perspective, when it comes to app virtualization, the app layering technologies, there's a number of ones that are working at these days, are getting mature enough that we think that's going to be the next generation to really even expand these use cases easier into the business arenas where you're talking about having hundreds of applications.
Talking about hundreds of applications, Ray, we've had a question about what were the EMRs that were being used, so I'll ask you that question. But also, maybe you could highlight, were there any applications that you found you were not able to virtualize or that you had to do special arrangements with? I think you mentioned drag and dictation is typically a bit of a bear, but any others that you'd like to highlight as problem applications working on to virtualize and move to a VDI environment?
There honestly weren't any that we weren't able to virtualize. Everyone didn't exactly submit to one formula, especially like in Torrance's environment. Not every application, when you're talking about AppV, only about 75 to 80% of the applications out there you're going to be able to virtualize. So in those scenarios, we had to deploy the application. A lot of times we just put it inside the published desktop and deliver as a published app. As far as the EMRs go, if I'm allowed to say, I guess you're asking the question, but Steve's is Cerner is Steve's EMR, and Marc Moak's is Meditech.
Okay, yeah, I hope I wasn't stepping on anybody's toes there, Steve or Marc. And from your perspective, Steve or Marc, were there any specific applications that you were most worried about or found were really mission critical to the success of this project for virtualizing?
This is Marc. Yeah, for us, of course, the most critical application was Meditech, as this is our main medical application, clinical application. So that was the biggest challenge, so making sure that we have a few rings running in the environment. We have a test ring and a few other that we utilize across multiple facilities. We have super users in multiple facilities. Some of the super users have to go to the test rings. So in combination with single sign-ons that we implemented with this solution, there were some challenges on which ring they accessing and how they accessing Meditech. And we actually came up with a great solution. Cortec helped us to come up with the solution where users basically being assigned to the correct group in the AD was able to reach either both or just go straight up to the live ring.
Excellent. Steve?
We spent a lot of time looking at which applications we thought would be most valuable, and certainly the EMR was at the top of the list. We've deployed others since, Dragon being one of them. And as Ray said, there's not necessarily a single formula for each to get them working appropriately, but we've had a lot of success with that, and we're continuing to look at where we can deploy the solution, and I'm sure the list of applications is just going to continue to grow.
Excellent. Okay, stepping back a little bit to the infrastructure and the back end side on it, I had a couple of questions around Nutanix and what tools you were using for the infrastructure, the back end, and whether you're using Nutanix for storage or you're using third parties for storage and backup capabilities. Ray, do you want to comment a little bit about the Cortex philosophy on that? And also, whilst we're at it, I'm going to wrap in another question around, how are you planning for scaling and growth? We talked a little bit about we start small, start with a pilot, and then grow to a full implementation. How was Nutanix helping with that? And maybe we'll even have Preeti from Nutanix give us a quick comment as well on what they're finding in the market out there. Ray?
Okay, so real quick on the scaling. In the back-end infrastructure was the Nutanix, it was based on the Nutanix solution, okay? And so that gives you if you're not familiar with Nutanix, that gives you your compute, right, and your storage all in one modular system that is incredibly easy to use, single pane of glass to be able to administer. And as far as scaling goes, with Nutanix, I call it, I don't have diagrams to it, but from a scaling perspective, you have your initial investment, which requires a minimum of 3 nodes. And then from there, you basically, and we'll normally deploy a pilot with that. We always tell people to pilot it. We usually pilot on one floor and maybe a few strategic desktops like the doctor's lounge, some other places where people travel to that might work on that pilot floor. We would recommend always doing a pilot, and that will bring out the devil in the little details as far as little workflow kinks or things you want to modify and change. I would also tell you that as far as Cortex goes, we've deployed over 200,000 virtual desktops in healthcare across the country. We have never went to pilot and not went to a full production. It has never happened for us, but we would always tell you still to go to a production pilot first. From there, you can also tell what kind of infrastructure that you're eating up. We can at that point measure the use cases and how much compute they require. We can extrapolate that out as you expand it out. And then with Nutanix, it's not a case of, our frame is full, we didn't buy enough, we didn't anticipate this, the IOPS or the disks we're going to require, and we got to buy a new frame or a new system. It's just as you need more, you fill up, you get one more node, and you modularly increase your capacity at a very ineffective rate from a cost perspective. And as far as an implementation goes, you plug in the node, and within typically 30 minutes to an hour, you have all that capacity is available to you. Sorry, that might have been, I hope that wasn't too long and drawn out, Simon. Hope I answered the question.
Not at all. Following up on that, now I'll switch over to, I'm not sure if Steve or Marc can answer this one, but I got a question from Marc over at BWX. Are you using Nutanix for all infrastructure, not just VDI, or what's the philosophy going on in the hospitals at the moment from your perspective, Marc and Steve, please?
Well, this is Marc. Right now, currently, that we're not using Nutanix for all of our infrastructure, but saying that, our view on how we're going to approach it in the future kind of changed with the Nutanix implementations. We started with the VDI, and we went through the deployment and the build with Cortex. Once we started deploying this, we started to utilizing in different areas. So for example, we had a migration that we had to do for our Kronos server, and update it to the newer version, and we decided that we're going to put it on the Nutanix. And the reason for this being, it was very easy to deploy it with the VMware on it, and also Nutanix provides with the great replication solution that lets us replicate that server over to our California data center for the high availability. As a matter of fact, it actually works better than VMware. That we use the replication from the VMware, and actually Nutanix replication works for us better than VMware replication. It's more stable. So as we're going forward, we're hoping that our EMR solution that we're looking at right now, or either upgrading or replacing, will allow us to use the Nutanix as our main platform, and we will move everything pretty much from Nutanix, from our other servers to Nutanix.
Excellent. All right. Well, we're coming to the top of the hour now, and Amy, I know, is going to sort of do a wrap up with us and ask a few questions. The final question of our infrastructure. I'm just one question away. I want to cover quickly. Ray, from a Cortex solution perspective, could you just comment on how you solve some of the printing and the roaming printing issues, and particularly what the Cortex philosophy is on using biometrics and special login devices? Are you seeing those being adopted more in your customers? And then we'll hand it back to Amy. Ray, over to you.
Okay, on the biometrics, on that side of it, hopefully that's a quicker answer. We definitely implement and work with those types of solutions where there are requirements. Again, that needs to be known up front in the architecting, because it really comes down to the endpoint. Thin client types dictate what can be supported, and there's only certain types of readers that are supported. We're seeing a lot more of this with the DEA pushing for the electronic prescribing for controlled substances. So if anyone hasn't heard of that, the state of Ohio's had similar laws forever. New York adopted it recently, and we're starting to see it across the country. Health systems be proactively implementing two-factor types of authentication. A lot of those are biometric when clinical staff are placing orders for controlled substances. So the short answer is yes, we see those. It's an architecting requirements type of discussion to tell you what the right solution, what types of readers they are. As far as printing goes, it all, again, requirements, the different EMRs impact what solutions we may recommend. For the very simplest solutions, we've actually used AppSense to remap printers when roaming. Depending on EMRs, like for Cerner, there are certain steps that have to be made. You have to implement something we prefer called advanced WTS on their side to handle back-end roaming. So there's no one real answer for all of those. All I can tell you is that we know that from both Windows printing and the back-end mainframe type systems that the EMRs run off of, that the printers have to roam. And we have solutions for every type of system within healthcare, as well as we've done the same thing outside of healthcare. But Epics, when you have an Epic environment, the ideal configuration and solution is a little bit different than necessarily a Cerner. And when you talk about Epic and some of these others, then you're talking about secure printing, pull printing potentially, where you is the ideal solution for some of those workflows, and that's where you literally just hit print. The job doesn't go straight to a printer unless you set up rules. What you do is you walk to any printer in the organization when you're ready for the output, and you tap your badge at a badge reader at that printer, or type in a PIN code at the console of the printer, and your output's going to come out. But unfortunately, there's no one answer. Honestly, that's where our years of consulting comes into play, is just understanding what your requirements are, what your back-end systems are, what your Windows requirements are, and what your roaming requirements are. Did that answer both those, Simon?
Perfect, Ray, and I'm going to pass control back to Amy. Thank you for your input answering these questions, and we will follow up with emails to everybody who's asked to ask questions of us. Thank you. Back to you, Amy.
Thanks, Simon. So we'll take this through to closing, and the last question here is really to get the last remarks from our panelists. And in closing, what advice would each of you give to anyone embarking upon a VDI project? So I'll start with Marc on this and maybe address it from the perspective of, with 2020 hindsight, what would you do differently, if anything?
I think that our approach to it was right, and we did it the right way. You cannot underestimate the importance of testing. You have to test, and it's clear. You gotta have a great application inventory prior to doing anything, and you gotta keep testing. The most critical part for us was partnering with the right partner, and Cortex turned out to be a great partner for us. We were looking for quite a while for somebody to help us with this, as this was a very big investment and a big deployment. So we were looking quite a bit to find somebody suitable, and we found out Cortec was perfect match for us. We really enjoyed working with those guys, and they actually helped us quite a bit. So I would say this is probably the best thing you can do to help yourself get together with the right people, get a good partner.
Excellent. So Steve, any comments and closing advice you give to anybody embarking upon a project?
Sure. Looking back at our experience, I would say as you move from pilot to deployment, do it in a way that makes sense for your organization. We were in a rather unusual situation where we had to make a decision about going from a small large deployment to support our new tower opening. As I mentioned, that made me uncomfortable, but Cortec did an excellent job getting us through that and deploying the solution that we now have. So the pilot is clearly important. It was really a great learning experience for us, and it proved that it could make a really meaningful difference in workflow and productivity and patient care in our organization. It's important to build a plan that's realistic for your organization. Every organization is different, and think about that. The other advice I would share is take time to engage your users, ask for their input. Our clinical informatics team, which is part of our team, was a critical part of our deployment. They worked very closely with our clinical staff. Everyone was actively engaged in testing. We did a lot of testing. As Marc said, that's important. And they helped us make a lot of decisions, even as simple as determining the optimal placement for badge readers on the keyboard trays and the mobile cards. And then the last piece of advice I would give is think about contingency. We built a solid infrastructure, and that's supported by Nutanix, but we had to address clinical staff concerns about backup and failover. So we've also deployed a number of what we call downtime computers on every floor where VDI has been deployed.
Ray, any last comments or advice you would give to anyone embarking upon a project?
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough to identify your use cases up front, working with a qualified partner, pilot the solution, because no matter what you think, test thoroughly coming up to it. So you got to test those applications to Marc's point, UAT, and then pilot the solution. You will not. There are just things that you will never be able to think of, even an organization like us, the minor details that will come out and get flowed out from a pilot, and then from there you can modify, adjust, and go full bore.
Okay, excellent, thanks. So let me comment a little bit about some of the things you all may have heard today. So just in summary, some of the real takeaways that you may take from this roundtable was that first is there really great times in your all's work to actually consider and implement VDI. And this can be anything from a breakpoint about implementing high availability or disaster recovery, from migrations, new construction or expansion in the case of Torrance, doing a EHR implementation, or even a hardware refresh. These provide both motivation and potentially available budget to do VDI. The second is, as you do VDI, expect a couple of things: a better workflow, an improved workflow for your users, and performance. Your users should be engaged as you go through this process, and you really want them to be excited and actually to continue to support the technology even as it becomes just the way that they work. And through this process, watch for unanticipated benefits, less time supporting devices in the case of Torrance, and the fact that you're going to save millions of dollars in productive time that people are not spending around waiting for information. Another point to consider is start with the POC or small pilot and then expand from there. Find the right desktops, deliver the rest desktop to your users, and really build on the successes of your POC and pilot, particularly with your user audience who will be some of your best advocates, because that user experience is crucial to overall project success. Start with your low-hanging fruit, like your clinical organizations, and as these organizations have noted to you, they're growing into other areas of their operations as the success of this catches on and spreads through their facilities. Another point here is that the technology that we've presented here is really fast to procure and deploy, and it really makes it much simpler and less overhead as you expand. So, mentioning being able to deploy thousands of users in a very short period of time, but as you've also probably discerned, the adoption of this technology has been pretty easy with the users. Once they realized what was happening, it was a pretty simple migration. And then finally, choose the right partners and participants in this process. And Cortec certainly has gotten high marks from both Torrance and Promise Healthcare for their assistance and their good work throughout this process. It's a journey through to VDI. This is a program that it will impact your business in many ways, but do so in a way that really makes you more efficient moving forward. And we encourage you to continue to connect with us. And on the screen, we've got an email address that you can use to get in touch with us of dna@appsense.com. And you can also visit with each of us at the upcoming HIM shows to see the solutions in action. Both Dell, Nutanix, AppSense, and Cortec will all have booths on the floor, and we're all ready, willing, and available to really speak with you there. So at this point, any last comments from any of our panelists here? And if not, I think we are done. So, Shelley, I'll turn this back over to you.
Just thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you to our speakers. This now concludes our session. Again, you can view the replay at the same URL tomorrow afternoon. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you.